I forgot to buy you a ticket. You're not welcome." My suitcase handle slipped from my grip, hitting the floor with a thud as I stared at my daughter standing right there in our living room. She grabbed her designer luggage and wheeled it toward the door, the sound of her laughter echoing off the walls as she paused to blow me a kiss. I watched my hands unclench, then slowly curve upward at the corners of my mouth. 5 days later, she would return to find two strangers sitting at our house, and what happened next would change everything she thought she knew about our family. Before we continue, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The morning had started differently. I had woken up early, humming while I packed the last items in my worn canvas suitcase. The brochures for the Bali resort were spread across my kitchen table, dog-eared from weeks of excited reading. I had even bought new swimming trunks and Hawaiian shirts that still had the price tags attached. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man grinning like a teenager before prom. Now Jessica stood in my living room wearing silk that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her phone screen reflected manicured nails that gleamed like small weapons. She pulled out a spare key, my spare key that I'd given her years ago for emergencies, and tossed it onto the coffee table like discarded evidence. My suitcase handle slipped from my grip, hitting the floor with a thud. My own hands, scarred from decades of construction work, still trembled slightly. The vacation brochures lay scattered on my coffee table where I had left them this morning, their bright tropical images now looking like mockery. $20,000, 6 months of my pension checks, 6 hours spent researching the perfect resort in Ubud, reading every review, comparing every amenity. The resort had a spa where I thought we might relax together. A restaurant overlooking rice terraces where we could talk about the future. Jessica's phone buzzed. Her fingers flew across the screen. The boarding passes she was booking would have different names now. The first-class seats I had splurged on. My money, my credit card, but not my trip anymore. Not my daughter anymore either. "You understand, right, Dad?" She didn't look up from her phone. "I forgot to buy you a ticket. You're not welcome. Ryan needs to come instead. He's been so stressed with his portfolio management job, and honestly, you'd just slow us down with all your health issues." My palm found my chest. The flannel shirt was still warm from the iron this morning. My reading glasses sat on the counter next to my coffee mug. The arthritis cream tube beside the sink where I had left it after my morning routine. 30 years of construction work had left their mark on my hands, but I still managed my own household, paid my own bills, and drove my own car. I bent down to pick up my suitcase, the one I had optimistically packed with Hawaiian shirts and the swimming trunks I hadn't worn in years. The photo albums inside shifted with a soft rustle. Pictures of her as a baby, family vacations when Sarah was still alive, graduations and birthday parties and Christmas mornings. Pictures I had planned to share with her during quiet evenings on the resort terrace. My reflection caught in the hallway mirror behind her. Gray hair, weathered hands that had built houses, shoulders that still carried the weight of all those years building other people's dreams. But my eyes weren't the eyes of a broken man. They were calculating. I watched my hands unclench, then slowly curve upward at the corners of my mouth. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady as concrete. "You have a wonderful time." The Uber honked outside and she was already dragging her Louis Vuitton toward the door. She paused just long enough to blow me a kiss, her perfume expensive and cold. Tom Ford, charged to the credit card she had convinced me to give her for emergencies. "Don't wait up," she said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "I'll text you from the resort. Try not to worry too much about, everything. I've got it all handled. Everything. My doctor's appointments that I kept track of myself. My bills that I paid on time every month. My house that I cleaned and maintained without help. All of it was reduced to everything that apparently needed her management. The door closed with a soft click and I stood alone in the house that had once been filled with her childhood laughter. But that little girl was gone, replaced by this stranger who saw me as nothing more than a retirement account with legs. I walked to my desk drawer and pulled out a business card I had kept for 6 months. Margaret Johnson, estate planning attorney. I had gotten her contact from my union representative after another member's son had tried to force his father into a nursing home to get his hands on the inheritance. The old man had fought back with Margaret's help, and won. Now I understood why he'd pressed her card into my hand with such urgency. But first, I allowed myself 5 minutes to feel the full weight of what had just happened. My daughter had stolen my vacation, my money, and my dignity in less than 15 minutes, and she had done it with the casual efficiency of someone who had been planning this for a long time. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was calculated, premeditated betrayal. The house felt different without Jessica's presence, quieter but somehow more honest. I sat in my worn leather recliner and let the memories wash over me. Sarah's death certificate was still in the filing cabinet, dated March 15, 2016. Jessica had been 16 then, her face wet with tears as she pressed against my chest that first night after the funeral. That first night after the funeral, Jessica had crawled into my bed like she used to do during thunderstorms when she was little. "I don't want to be alone," she whispered. I held her while she cried until there were no tears left. In trying to shield her from every hardship, I had created someone incapable of recognizing hardship in others. Every time she had asked for money over the years, I had said yes without question. College tuition, graduate school, the security deposit on her Manhattan apartment, the down payment on her BMW. I had made a promise to Sarah as she lay dying in that sterile hospital room. "Take care of our baby girl," she had whispered, her fingers like paper against mine. "Make sure she has everything we never did." And God help me, I had kept that promise too well. Every sacrifice felt like love. Every yes when I should have said no had felt like honoring Sarah's memory. Sarah had grown up poor, the daughter of immigrants who worked double shifts to keep food on the table. She used to tell me stories about wearing the same dress to school every day for a month, about pretending she wasn't hungry when there wasn't enough dinner to go around. "Our children will never know that feeling," she had said, and I had taken that promise seriously. The Columbia Business School acceptance letter was still framed on the mantel, right next to Jessica's high school graduation photo. $47,000 a year, and I had paid every cent. I remembered the night shifts at the construction site, my body aching as I mixed concrete at 2 in the morning. The weekend security guard job that had stolen my Saturdays for 4 years. The way I had learned to survive on 3 hours of sleep, because love, I thought, meant sacrifice. During Jessica's sophomore year, I had been hospitalized for exhaustion. The doctor had warned me about the dangers of chronic sleep deprivation, the way it was aging my body faster than it should. But when Jessica called from her dorm room crying about how expensive textbooks were, I had picked up extra shifts to cover the costs. When she wanted to study abroad in London for a semester, I had taken out a personal loan to make it happen. I should have seen the warning signs then, the way she had stopped asking how I was doing and started demanding updates on when her next allowance would arrive. The way she had begun treating my financial support as an entitlement rather than a gift. The casual dismissal when I mentioned being tired or stressed. "You'll be fine, Dad. You're stronger than you think." The grateful hugs stopped lasting as long. The weekly calls became monthly. When she landed her job at Goldman Sachs, her salary in 1 year exceeded my income in 3. The calls stopped almost entirely. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements, something I had been avoiding for months. The numbers told a story I had been too blind to see. The Bali vacation package, $20,000. The emergency loan I had taken against my pension to cover it, 15% interest. The credit card she had convinced me to add her name to just for emergencies, $17,000 in charges over the past year. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, a weekend in the Hamptons with Ryan, a man I had met exactly once and instantly disliked. Ryan Stevens, who claimed to be a portfolio manager at some boutique investment firm, but whose business card felt flimsy between my fingers when he'd handed it to me. He had looked at my modest living room and whistled low. "Wow, Jessica, this is so authentic, very blue-collar chic." Jessica had laughed, her hand finding his arm. "Don't mind the decor, babe. We won't be dealing with this much longer." Even then, warning bells had rung in my head, but I'd dismissed them as an old man's prejudice against his daughter's boyfriend. The credit card statements read like a catalog of betrayal. Charges at restaurants that cost more per meal than I spent on groceries in a week. A $1,000 handbag purchased the same day I had mentioned struggling to pay my property taxes. A weekend spa retreat charged to my account while I was working overtime to cover the bills she was secretly creating. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Thanks for understanding, Dad. Love you," followed by a heart emoji. I stared at those words until they blurred, then deleted the message without responding. The casual "love you" felt like the cruelest part of all. Empty words designed to assuage whatever minimal guilt she might feel about abandoning me. Outside, Mrs. Rodriguez was watering her garden, the same routine she had followed for the past decade. Normal people living normal lives, while I sat in the wreckage of mine. Mrs. Rodriguez had lost her husband 2 years ago, but her children visited every Sunday, helped with yard work, and brought their grandchildren to play in her backyard. I watched her through the window and wondered what I had done wrong. I picked up the business card again, running my thumb over the embossed letters. Margaret Johnson had come recommended by my union representative. "She specializes in family financial abuse," he had told me, "especially when adult children think their parents are easy marks." The phrase had stuck with me. Easy marks. Was that what I had become? A sentimental old fool so desperate for his daughter's love that he would bankrupt himself to maintain the illusion of their relationship? The evidence was right there in my bank statements, a year-by-year chronicle of escalating exploitation disguised as family affection. The first call I made was to Margaret. The second was to a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former police detective who specialized in documenting financial fraud. By the time the sun set, I had appointments scheduled for the next morning. Jessica thought she was dealing with a sentimental old fool. She was about to learn how wrong she could be. But as I prepared for bed that night, unpacking the suitcase I would never take to Bali, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Clarity. For the first time since Sarah's death, I wasn't making decisions based on fear or guilt. I was making them based on truth, and the truth was that my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. Margaret Johnson's office smelled like leather and authority, the kind of place where important decisions were made and documented. She was younger than I had expected, maybe 45, with steel gray hair pulled back and the bearing of someone who had seen enough family ugliness to remain perpetually unimpressed. She spread my financial documents across her mahogany desk like a detective examining crime scene evidence. The walls of her office were lined with law books and framed certifications, but what caught my attention were the family photos scattered across her credenza. Pictures of what looked like her own children, a boy and girl, maybe 8 and 10 years old, smiling at birthday parties and school events. For a moment, I wondered if she had ever worried about them growing up to see her as nothing more than a bank account. "How long has this been going on, David?" She pointed to a series of charges on my credit card statement. "These aren't small purchases. Bergdorf Goodman, Tiffany's, Le Bernardin. Your daughter has expensive tastes." I watched her finger trace down the list of charges. The Tiffany charge was from Valentine's Day, $600 for what Jessica had claimed was a friendship bracelet for her college roommate. Le Bernardin appeared 3 times in the past 2 months, always with charges exceeding $300 per meal. I had been eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner while my daughter dined on Michelin-starred cuisine with my money. She told me the credit card was for emergencies. Her student loans were overwhelming, and she needed help getting established in the city. I cleared my throat. I thought I was helping her build a stable life. Margaret nodded, making notes in her precise handwriting. Her penmanship was beautiful, each letter formed with care. Adult children who financially abuse their parents often start small. A phone bill here, a car payment there. They test boundaries, see how much they can get away with. When there's no resistance, they escalate. She looked up at me. The pattern is always the same. They begin by manufacturing crises, sudden expenses, unexpected bills, temporary cash flow problems. The parent helps out of love and concern, but what starts as genuine assistance transforms into systematic exploitation. "Tell me about the power of attorney documents," she continued, opening a second folder. What power of attorney documents? But even as I asked, I remembered Jessica's visit last month. The stack of papers she had claimed were just updated insurance beneficiary forms that I needed to sign. She had been casual about it, chatting about her work while I signed wherever she pointed. The meeting had taken place right here in my kitchen, over coffee and the apple pie I had baked because I knew it was her favorite. "Don't worry about reading all this legal jargon," she had said, laughing as she flipped through page after page of dense text. "It's just boring insurance stuff. The company requires updated signatures every few years." Her voice had been casual, dismissive, but I remembered now how she'd angled the papers away from me, how her finger had guided my pen to specific spots without letting me read the surrounding text. I had trusted her completely, signing my name wherever she indicated while she told me about her latest project at Goldman Sachs. The memory felt different now, calculated rather than loving, manipulative rather than helpful. "Marcus Webb found some interesting filings at the county clerk's office," Margaret continued, producing a manila folder thick with official-looking documents. "Your daughter filed a limited power of attorney 6 weeks ago. According to this, you granted her the right to make financial decisions on your behalf due to declining mental capacity." I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what she was telling me. The leather was soft under my fingers. "I never agreed to that. I'm not mentally incompetent. I run my own household, manage my own affairs." "I know," Margaret said quietly. "But on paper, she's painted a very different picture. She's been telling people you're showing signs of early dementia. She's even scheduled an appointment with a geriatric psychiatrist for next week, supposedly to have you evaluated." She slid another document across the desk, this one bearing the letterhead of Dr. Richard Harrison, M.D., Geriatric Psychiatry. The appointment was for next Thursday at 2 in the afternoon, scheduled for a comprehensive cognitive assessment that I had never agreed to and knew nothing about. "This is a preliminary application to have you declared mentally incompetent and her self-appointed as your conservator," Margaret explained, pointing to a section of legal text. I stared at the paperwork, seeing my own forged signature at the bottom of forms I had never seen before. The signature was good, not perfect, but close enough to pass casual inspection. Jessica had clearly practiced. My hands began to shake. 24 years I had raised her, sacrificed everything for her future, and this was how she repaid me, by trying to have me declared mentally unfit so she could control my assets. The betrayal was complete, calculated. This wasn't the impulsive greed of a young person making bad decisions. This was a systematic campaign to strip me of my legal rights and personal autonomy. "There's more," Margaret said, opening another folder. "Marcus has been very thorough. Your daughter has been researching nursing homes in the area, high-end facilities that accept Medicaid after the patient's assets are depleted. She's also been in contact with a realtor about listing your house." She spread out printouts of internet searches, email conversations, and real estate listings. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Jessica had been planning this for months, maybe longer. While I had been worrying about her student loans and career stress, she had been systematically preparing to have me institutionalized and my assets liquidated. The nursing home brochures were chilling. Sunset Manor, a facility 40 miles outside the city that specialized in memory care for seniors with cognitive decline. The marketing materials were glossy and professional, but I could read between the lines. This was where inconvenient parents were sent to die quietly while their children got on with their lives. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The vacation to Bali wasn't just about excluding me. It was about keeping me distracted while she finalized her plan to steal my life out from under me. The Loving Daughter Act had been exactly that, an act. I was nothing more than a bank account. She was systematically draining before discarding me. I stood up from my chair. "What do we do about it?" Margaret smiled for the first time since I had walked into her office. Her lips curved upward, but her eyes remained cold. "We document everything. We gather evidence, and then we give your daughter exactly what she deserves." She reached for her phone. "Marcus should be here any minute with the surveillance footage. You're going to want to see this." Marcus Webb looked exactly like what you'd expect from a retired detective. Weathered face, observant eyes that missed nothing, and the kind of presence that made people instinctively confess things they hadn't planned to share. He carried a tablet and a thick manila envelope, setting both on Margaret's desk with the care of someone handling explosive evidence. His hands were steady, professional, but his jaw was tight. "Your daughter's been busy," he said, powering up the tablet. "I've been documenting her activities for the past 2 weeks. She's not just stealing from you, David. She's building a case to have you institutionalized." "But wait," I frowned. 2 weeks? Jessica's been in Bali for 5 days. "Exactly," Marcus said grimly. "She's been planning this long before the vacation. The Bali trip was her alibi. Make you think she's far away, while her associates here execute the next phase." The screen flickered to life, showing security footage from what looked like a medical office waiting room. But this wasn't from last week. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago, Tuesday afternoon, 2:15. Dr. Harrison's office. I watched my daughter walk into Dr. Harrison's office. She wore a conservative navy dress, her hair pulled back in a style that made her look older, more responsible. Even her posture was different, shoulders hunched as if carrying a burden. The audio was clear. "He's getting worse," Jessica's voice came through the tablet speakers. "Last week he tried to give our mailman $500 because he thought it was Christmas. He's been talking to my deceased mother, having full conversations with empty rooms. I'm worried he's going to hurt himself, or worse, someone else." Every word was a lie. The mailman story was impossible to verify, but specific enough to sound credible. The detail about talking to Sarah was cruel, twisting my occasional habit of speaking her name aloud into evidence of mental illness. Dr. Harrison took careful notes, nodding as my daughter painted me as a man teetering on the edge of complete mental collapse. She had researched the symptoms of dementia thoroughly, crafting a narrative that hit every diagnostic marker. "He gets confused about money," she continued, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Last month he tried to withdraw $10,000 in cash because he thought the bank was going to steal it. The teller had to call me to come get him." Another lie. If Dr. Harrison believed I was paranoid about money, it would make perfect sense for my daughter to step in and take control of my finances. "There's more," Marcus said, swiping to the next video. This one showed Jessica at Le Bernardin, laughing with Ryan and another couple. But this wasn't from her supposed work dinner. The timestamp showed it was from the same day as her psychiatrist visit. Jessica was in celebration mode, her laughter carrying across the dining room as she gestured with her wine glass. "Turn up the volume," Margaret instructed. "The old man's finally losing it," Jessica was saying, cutting into expensive fish. "The psychiatrist says with my documentation, getting conservatorship should be straightforward. 6 months, maybe less, and I'll have full control of his assets." Ryan raised his wine glass, his smile cruel. "To early retirement, courtesy of Daddy Dearest." They all clinked glasses, toasting my anticipated downfall. I had worked myself into exhaustion for this woman, and she was celebrating my destruction with people I had never met. "The best part," Jessica continued, taking a sip of wine, "is that he has no idea what's coming. He's so desperate for my approval that he'd sign anything I put in front of him. Yesterday, he asked me if I needed more money for emergencies." Margaret paused the video and looked at me. The silence in the office was deafening, but Marcus wasn't finished. "There's something else about Ryan Stevens you need to know," he said, pulling out another file. "He's not just Jessica's boyfriend. He's her business partner." He spread out bank documents, corporate filings, and what looked like partnership agreements. "Stevens Financial Consulting, LLC. I registered 3 months ago. Jessica Thompson, 51% owner. Ryan Stevens, 49%. "What kind of business?" I asked. "Elder Care Consulting," Marcus said grimly. "They help families transition aging relatives into appropriate care facilities while maximizing asset preservation." That's a direct quote from their business plan. My daughter had turned elder abuse into a business model, and I was their first client. "They've already identified their next targets," Marcus continued, showing me a list of names. "All elderly parents of Jessica's co-workers. All with significant assets and single adult children." Margaret leaned forward. "David, what she's doing isn't just morally reprehensible. It's criminal. Elder financial abuse is a federal offense. Forging documents, filing false reports about your mental state, attempting to fraudulently gain conservatorship, operating an unlicensed business designed to defraud seniors, we're talking about serious prison time. But here's what really concerns me, Marcus said. She's not planning to stop at financial control. I traced their internet searches. They've been researching expedited probate proceedings and looking up the average life expectancy of men your age in assisted living facilities. He pulled out printouts of browser history. The searches were methodical, chilling. Average life expectancy nursing home male 60. How long before probate? Expediting estate settlement, deceased parent. Medications that cause confusion in elderly patients. Insulin overdose symptoms, elderly. The last search made my blood run cold. They weren't just planning to steal my money and lock me away. They had researched the exact method they intended to use to kill me. There's one more thing, Marcus said. Jessica's been meeting with an insurance agent about increasing your life insurance policy. She's listed herself as the sole beneficiary, and she's been asking about policies that don't require medical exams for men your age. The policy amount? $2 million. My daughter wasn't just stealing from me. She was betting on my death like a racehorse, calculating the exact return on her investment in my murder. What do you recommend? Margaret exchanged a look with Marcus. We set a trap. She thinks you're a confused old man who doesn't understand what's happening around him. We let her keep thinking that while we document everything. When she comes back from Bali, she's going to walk into a room full of evidence and federal agents. She pulled out a thick legal document. This is a criminal complaint I've prepared for the FBI's Elder Abuse Task Force. All we need is one more piece of evidence. Her attempting to execute the power of attorney she fraudulently obtained. I thought about the woman who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms, who had cried when her pet goldfish died. That little girl was gone, replaced by a stranger who saw me as nothing more than inventory in her business plan. Do it, I said, signing my name where Margaret indicated. Let's give her exactly what she deserves. The next 4 days passed like a carefully orchestrated performance, each hour planned with the precision of a military operation. I played my part perfectly. The confused, elderly father stumbling through his daily routine while his devoted daughter enjoyed her stolen vacation on the other side of the world. Every action was calculated to reinforce the narrative Jessica had constructed about my declining mental state. Margaret had coached me on the details. Confusion about dates and times, she had explained. Leave voice messages that ramble or trail off. Mention appointments that don't exist. Ask about medications you don't take. The goal is to create a record that supports her claims about your mental state, right up until the moment we reveal the truth. I left voice messages on Jessica's phone that ranged from worried to rambling, each one carefully crafted to sound like the confused old man she wanted me to be. Sweetheart, it's Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday. I can't remember. Dr. Peterson called about my blood pressure medication, but I thought my doctor was Dr. Johnson. Can you call me back? I'm worried I missed an appointment. Each message was a small masterpiece of calculated confusion, designed to build the case she thought she was making against me. But every word was also evidence of her manipulation, documentation that would later prove how she had coached me to behave in ways that supported her fraud. Margaret's team worked with quiet efficiency while I performed my charade. Hidden cameras were installed throughout my house by technicians who looked like cable repair workers, positioned to capture any attempts Jessica might make to access my personal documents or manipulate my environment. The living room, kitchen, and my home office were all under surveillance. The FBI's Elder Abuse Task Force reviewed the evidence Marcus had compiled, and Agent Sarah Williams, a specialist in financial crimes against seniors, was assigned to the case. She came to my house Wednesday afternoon to review the setup, her credentials impressive and her manner both professional and reassuring. Your daughter has made a significant mistake, Agent Williams explained as we walked through my house, checking camera angles and testing audio equipment. She's documented her crimes extensively, both in her digital footprint and in her communications with medical professionals. When she attempts to execute the fraudulent power of attorney, we'll have everything we need. Agent Williams was younger than I had expected, maybe 40, with calm competence. She showed me how the recording equipment worked, how to activate it if Jessica tried to coerce me into signing additional documents. The most important thing is to let her talk, she advised. People like your daughter are often so confident in their schemes that they'll confess to everything if you give them enough rope. Don't challenge her directly. Just ask questions and let her explain herself. But there's something else, Agent Williams continued, opening another file. We've been tracking a multi-state operation. Ryan Stevens' real name is Richard Sterling. He's been running elder fraud schemes across 3 states with different partners. 3 elderly victims, all now in nursing homes, all their assets liquidated. Harold Morrison in Florida died last month. An insulin overdose that looked like a medical accident. The room went cold. Jessica wasn't just planning financial abuse. She had partnered with a serial killer who specialized in murdering elderly parents for their money. On Thursday morning, I received the text I had been waiting for. Landing at JFK at 3 p.m. Can't wait to tell you about the trip. See you soon. The exclamation point felt like a particular insult. The message was followed by a series of photos from Bali. Jessica and Ryan posing on pristine beaches, dining at expensive restaurants, lounging by infinity pools that overlooked jungle vistas. Every image was a reminder of what my $20,000 had purchased, a celebration of my anticipated destruction, funded by my own money. I spent the afternoon preparing the house for what Margaret had dubbed the confrontation. The dining room table was cleared and set with neat stacks of financial documents, printouts of Jessica's fraudulent filings, and transcripts of her recorded conversations. It looked like a war room. The evidence was overwhelming when laid out in its entirety. Bank statements showing years of escalating theft, forged legal documents bearing my signature on forms I had never seen, medical reports claiming cognitive decline that I had never experienced, real estate listings for my house that I had never authorized. At 2:30, Margaret arrived with Agent Williams, both women dressed in conservative business attire that projected authority and competence. Agent Williams wore the navy blazer I had mentioned in my carefully planted hints to Jessica about having visitors while she was away. Your daughter will likely try to gaslight you, Agent Williams explained as we took our positions around the dining room table. She'll claim you're confused, that you don't understand what's happening. It's a common tactic among financial abusers when they're confronted. Don't let her derail the conversation. Margaret reviewed the legal documents one final time, ensuring every signature was in order, every piece of evidence properly documented and admissible in court. Remember, David, you're not the victim here anymore. You're the prosecutor. This is your house, your life, your choice about how this ends. Marcus had positioned himself across the street with a clear view of the front door, ready to document Jessica's arrival and initial reaction. Everything was in place. 24 years of love and sacrifice had led to this moment, and I felt strangely calm about what was about to unfold. The house was quiet, except for the subtle hum of recording equipment and the distant sound of traffic from the street. Mrs. Rodriguez was working in her garden across the way, her normal routine providing a comforting sense of ordinary life continuing while extraordinary events prepared to unfold in my living room. At 3:45, I heard the familiar sound of a key in the front door. Jessica's voice carried from the entryway, bright and cheerful as she called out, "Dad, I'm home. You won't believe the amazing time we had." The sound of wheels on hardwood announced her approach, the same Louis Vuitton luggage she had wheeled out of my life 5 days earlier, now returning like evidence in her own prosecution. She was about to walk into a trap of her own making, constructed from her own lies and documented with her own words. Through the doorway, I could see her pause to check her reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothing her hair and adjusting her expression into the mask of loving concern she wore when she thought I was watching. The tan from Bali made her skin glow with health and vitality. She wheeled her suitcase into the living room and stopped dead when she saw Margaret and Agent Williams sitting at my dining table. Her smile vanished. "Dad? Who are these people?" Her shoulders pulled back, chin jutted forward. Her voice dropped half an octave, each word precise and clipped. "This is Margaret Johnson, my attorney," I said, "and Agent Williams from the FBI. They're here to discuss some irregularities in my financial records." Jessica's eyebrows shot up, her mouth opened slightly, then her eyes narrowed to slits. She forced a laugh that cracked at the edges. FBI? Dad, you're being paranoid again. Remember what Dr. Harrison said about your confusion? Maybe we should call him. Agent Williams stood up, her badge visible on her blazer. Ms. Thompson, I'm Special Agent Sarah Williams with the Bureau's Elder Abuse Task Force. We'd like to ask you some questions about your recent financial activities and the legal documents you've filed regarding your father's mental capacity. Jessica's knuckles turned white around the suitcase handle. Then she straightened her shoulders and looked directly at me. I don't know what kind of lies these people have been filling your head with, but you're making a huge mistake. Each word dropped like a stone. You need me, whether you want to admit it or not. Agent Williams opened the first folder on the table. Let's start with the power of attorney documents you filed 6 weeks ago. Documents that claim your father granted you financial authority due to declining mental capacity. Would you like to explain how you obtained his signature on forms he's never seen? Jessica stepped closer to the table, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood. Those documents are perfectly legal. My father asked me to help him manage his affairs because he's been getting confused. Haven't you, Dad? She turned to me with a smile that stopped at her lips. Remember last month when you called me crying because you couldn't figure out how to pay your electric bill online, or when you got lost driving to the grocery store you've been going to for 10 years? More lies, delivered with the conviction of someone who'd rehearsed them. I've never called you crying about anything, I said quietly. And I've never gotten lost driving anywhere. Jessica's smile faltered, and her eyes darted toward the door before snapping back to me. Dad, you're embarrassing yourself. These people are taking advantage of your confusion. Why don't you go rest in your room while I handle this? She was trying to dismiss me from my own confrontation, to send me away like a confused child while she spun her web of lies. I'm not going anywhere, I said, standing up. This is my house, Jessica, my life, and I'm not confused about anything that's happening here. Really? Her voice rose, edged with steel. Then maybe you can explain why you've been stockpiling medications in your bedroom drawer? Or why have you been calling me at 3 a.m. asking if Mom is coming home for dinner? Agent Williams looked up from her notes, pen poised. Because that's what Agent Williams needs to hear, isn't it? Jessica continued, her voice climbing higher. Evidence of your declining mental state. Evidence that justifies everything I've been trying to do to protect you from yourself. She whirled around to face Agent Williams directly. Do you want to know the truth? My father has been showing signs of dementia for over a year, but he's too proud and too stubborn to admit it. So yes, I forged some signatures. Yes, I filed paperwork to get legal authority to help him, because someone has to protect him from his own failing mind. Jessica had transformed from caught criminal to desperate daughter trying to save her father from himself. And Ryan? I asked quietly. Was protecting me worth partnering with a killer? Jessica froze. What are you talking about? Richard Sterling, Agent Williams said calmly, also known as Ryan Stevens, your business partner who was arrested this morning attempting to liquidate your father's remaining assets while you were establishing your alibi in Bali. The same man who killed Harold Morrison in Florida using an insulin overdose. Jessica's mouth fell open. She stepped backward, gripping the suitcase handle, her free hand pressed against her chest. For a moment, her shoulders sagged. That's impossible. Ryan's in Bali with me. We have photos, hotel receipts. You have photos of yourself with a paid actor, Agent Williams interrupted. Richard Sterling never left New York. He's been systematically emptying your father's accounts while you established your alibi overseas. The man you think you know as Ryan Stevens doesn't exist. Her hand started to shake, and she blinked rapidly, looking from Agent Williams to me and back again. No, that's not... Ryan wouldn't... We had a plan. He loved me. The last words came out as a whisper. Your plan was to have your father declared incompetent, steal his assets, warehouse him in a nursing home, and then have your partner kill him with a staged insulin overdose, Agent Williams said. The same plan Richard Sterling used in Florida, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. We never planned to hurt him, Jessica screamed, her voice echoing off the walls of my living room. Richard said it would be peaceful. He said they just went to sleep and didn't wake up. I thought we were just... I didn't know he had killed anyone." Words spilled from her mouth in a torrent. "He told me his other clients had just passed naturally in their care facilities. He said we were helping families transition to difficult situations. I never wanted you to die." She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted the money before you spent it all on medical bills. I thought you'd live for years in the nursing home, and by then I'd have secured my future. I never wanted you dead." Agent Williams was writing furiously, capturing every word. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Jessica's ragged breathing and Agent Williams's pen scratching across her notepad. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a surgical procedure, precise and devastating, each revelation calculated to strip away another layer of Jessica's carefully constructed facade. Agent Williams laid out each piece of evidence with methodical efficiency: the forged signatures, the fraudulent medical claims, the recorded conversations from the restaurant. Her voice climbed an octave, her hands gestured frantically, and the mask of loving concern she had worn for so long slipped completely away. "He's not thinking clearly," she insisted, pointing at me as if I weren't sitting right there at my own dining room table. Her finger trembled. "Ask anyone who knows him. He's been confused for months. I was trying to protect him from himself." Margaret slid a tablet across the table, cued to the restaurant surveillance footage. The screen showed Jessica and Ryan raising their wine glasses in that mock toast, their laughter cruel and celebratory. "Would you like to explain this conversation about toasting your father's downfall and discussing his life expectancy in assisted living?" I watched my daughter's face as she listened to her own voice celebrating my anticipated death. No guilt flickered across her features, no moment of remorse, just cold calculation as she tried to figure out how to minimize the damage. "That was taken out of context," she said, though her hands were shaking now. "The evidence was too overwhelming. We were just joking around. You can't seriously think—" "Mr. Richard Sterling," Agent Williams interrupted, producing another folder from her briefcase, "was arrested this morning on charges of conspiracy to commit elder fraud. He's currently cooperating with our investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence." She slumped in her chair, her perfect posture collapsing as she realized the full scope of the trap she had walked into. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. "Richard told us everything," Agent Williams continued, her voice matter-of-fact. "The plan to have you declared incompetent, the nursing home research, the life insurance inquiries. The charges against you are extensive," Agent Williams continued, reading from a legal document. "Elder financial abuse, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and filing false reports with medical professionals. The federal sentencing guidelines suggest 8 to 12 years in prison." Jessica looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. "Daddy," she whispered, using a name she hadn't called me in years. Her voice was small, broken. "Please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter." She was still trying to work the same emotional levers she had been pulling for years. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotional chaos swirling around us. "You are still my daughter, and that's why I'm going to give you one chance to make this right." Margaret placed a different set of documents on the table, these ones crisp and official, bearing multiple signatures and legal seals. "These papers transfer ownership of all fraudulently obtained assets back to your father. You'll also enter a plea agreement that includes mandatory financial counseling, community service, and supervised probation. The alternative is federal prison." Jessica stared at the papers, her hands shaking so violently that she could barely hold the pen Margaret offered her. "What about my job, my apartment, my life?" Her voice was small now, childlike. "The life you built with stolen money?" I stood up, feeling older than my 58 years, but also somehow lighter. "You'll have to build a new one, an honest one." The words hung in the air between us, final and irreversible. There would be no going back to the old dynamic, no return to the toxic relationship where my love was treated as weakness and my generosity was seen as stupidity. This was the end of one story and the beginning of another. She signed the papers with tears streaming down her face, each signature an admission of the betrayal that had brought us to this moment. Her mascara ran in dark streaks down her cheeks, and her hands left damp fingerprints on the legal documents. When she finished, Agent Williams read her rights in the same calm, professional tone she had used throughout the confrontation. The Miranda warning sounded surreal in my living room, transforming a family dispute into a criminal matter with the weight of federal law behind it. Jessica was handcuffed with restraints that looked almost delicate on her wrists. She was escorted to a waiting car for processing, her designer luggage left behind in my hallway like abandoned evidence of her crimes. She didn't look back as the car pulled away from my house, her head down and her shoulders shaking. I watched from my front window until the car disappeared around the corner. That evening, I sat in my worn leather recliner and called my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, to thank her for watering my plants while I was away on business. The conversation was blessedly normal, filled with updates about her grandchildren and concerns about the neighborhood raccoons getting into her bird feeders. For 20 minutes, I was just a regular person having a regular conversation. The house felt different now, not empty, but clean. The lies and manipulation that had poisoned the air for months were gone, replaced by the simple truth of what had happened. I walked through rooms that had been under surveillance for the past week, cameras now silent. I thought about Sarah, about the promise I had made to take care of our daughter. I had kept that promise, but not in the way either of us had intended. Sometimes taking care of someone means setting boundaries. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your child is the chance to face the consequences of their choices. The vacation photos from Bali would never exist, at least not in my photo albums. The $20,000 was gone forever, spent on a celebration of my anticipated destruction rather than the family bonding trip I had imagined. But sitting there in the gathering darkness, I realized I had received something far more valuable: my dignity, my autonomy, and the knowledge that I was nobody's fool. Over the following weeks, the legal machinery ground forward with impersonal efficiency. Jessica's apartment was searched, yielding additional evidence of her financial crimes and her research into my planned institutionalization. Her computer contained spreadsheets tracking my assets, my spending patterns, my supposed cognitive decline. The spreadsheets were chilling. She had categorized my expenses, noting which ones were necessary and which were wasteful. My weekly coffee with Mrs. Rodriguez was marked as pointless social spending. The small donations I made to my church were labeled irrational charitable giving. Even my prescription medications were scrutinized, with notes about cheaper generic alternatives. She had turned my entire life into a cost-benefit analysis, reducing every human moment to a line item that either served her interest or represented inefficiency to be eliminated. But there were also unexpected moments of grace in the aftermath. Mrs. Rodriguez brought me casseroles and asked no questions about the police cars that had visited my house. When I finally told her a simplified version of what had happened, she nodded with the wisdom of someone who had seen enough of life to know that family could sometimes be the source of our deepest wounds. "Children don't always turn out the way we hope," she said, patting my hand with her weathered fingers. "But that doesn't mean we failed as parents. Sometimes people choose to become something we never taught them to be." My union representative checked in regularly, offering both practical support and the solidarity of someone who understood how adult children could sometimes become predators. Marcus Webb, the private investigator, refused payment for his final week of work. "Some cases you take for money," he told me when I tried to write him a check. "Others you take because they matter. This one mattered." Margaret Johnson became something approaching a friend during those difficult weeks. She helped me understand that what Jessica had done wasn't just a crime against me personally, but part of a broader epidemic of financial elder abuse that was destroying families across the country. Adult children steal more money from their elderly parents than all other forms of elder abuse combined, she told me, and it's getting worse every year. 3 months later, I received a letter from Jessica, written from the federal facility where she was serving her sentence. The handwriting was familiar, but the tone was different, less manipulative, more genuinely remorseful. She wrote about the counseling she was receiving, about learning that Richard Sterling had manipulated her just as she had manipulated me, about the slow process of understanding how she had become someone capable of such betrayal. "I thought I loved him," she wrote, "but he was using me the same way I was using you. The difference is, you loved me despite everything, and I threw that away for money that was never even real. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to earn it back. But I want you to know that I finally understand what I did to you, and I'm sorry." My reply: "I love you, Jessica. I always will. But love without respect isn't enough to build a relationship on. When you're ready to treat me as a person rather than a resource, we can talk about what comes next." 6 months after Jessica's arrest, I made a decision that surprised even me. I sold the house and moved to a smaller place closer to the community center. The new house had a garden where I could grow vegetables, a workshop where I could return to the woodworking I had loved. The garden became my sanctuary, a place where I could work with my hands and watch things grow without worrying about whether they would be taken from me. I planted tomatoes and peppers, herbs and flowers, creating something beautiful that belonged entirely to me. Mrs. Rodriguez helped me choose the right plants for the soil and climate, sharing seeds from her own garden and wisdom from decades of nurturing growing things. Working in the soil reminded me of the construction sites where I had spent my career. But this was different. Instead of building for other people's dreams, I was cultivating my own small patch of earth. The physical work was therapeutic, grounding me in the present moment rather than the painful memories of Jessica's betrayal. 1 year after Jessica's arrest, I received an unexpected visitor. A young woman named Maria, barely out of college, knocked on my door on a Saturday morning. She introduced herself as a victim's advocate with the Elder Abuse Task Force. "My grandmother went through something similar," she explained as we sat in my living room, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked my flourishing garden. "Her son stole everything from her over the course of 5 years. She died in a state-run nursing home while he lived in her house and spent her money." Maria had read about my case in the legal filings and wanted to ask if I would consider speaking to other victims, sharing my story as part of a support network for families dealing with financial elder abuse. The idea terrified me at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If my story could help even one person recognize the warning signs earlier than I had, if it could give someone the courage to seek help before losing everything, then perhaps some good could come from all the pain Jessica had caused. My first speaking engagement was at a community center in the next town over, addressing a room of about 30 people whose experiences mirrored my own. I told them about Jessica's systematic manipulation, about the forged documents and fraudulent power of attorney, about the moment I realized my own daughter was planning my death as a financial convenience. The questions afterward were the hardest part. "How did you not see it coming?" asked one elderly man whose son had stolen his pension. "What signs did you miss?" wondered a woman whose daughter had forged her name on reverse mortgage documents. I answered as honestly as I could, acknowledging my own blindness, my desperate desire to believe that love could overcome anything, and my willingness to enable destructive behavior because I couldn't bear the thought of losing my only child. "We see what we want to see," I told them. And predators, even when they're our own children, are very good at showing us exactly what we need to see to keep the money flowing. If you found meaning in this story of reclaiming respect and setting boundaries, I'd appreciate your support by sharing your thoughts about family relationships and personal dignity in the comments below. The journey of rebuilding trust and self-worth after betrayal is never easy, but it's always possible for those willing to do the work. There are more stories of people finding their strength in unexpected moments. Just click on the suggested video to continue the journey. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand the respect you deserve, and to build a life based on truth rather than manipulation.